As those of you who know me know, that the only way I can make myself nervous before I make a speech is to try and arrive late, in which case I'm nervous about being here on time. In this case, I'm nervous because they wanted me to cover everything in 8 minutes. Nobody asked me what I was going to say. Herb, 8 minutes. The steak is coming. I've never been under that strain. But I wanted to take advantage of 8 minutes to talk to you just a little bit, because as you get to the stage where I am, you've been there. A lot of it has happened, and a lot less things will happen in the future. And if there's some thoughts that you can share with people, maybe now's the time to do it. I'm not anxious to do any more speeches. I don't need to be interviewed on television. I don't need to be on 60 Minutes. None of that interests me. I loved being a trial lawyer when everybody hated him, because I thought we were doing the right thing. When I started practicing, there were 43,000 deaths in California from automobile accidents. There's 4 times as many cars on the road now as there were then. That means we should now have 190 to 200,000 deaths from automobiles. We don't. We don't. We have the same number as 50 years ago. Why? Because friends of mine, and I guess I can include myself, we decided that there was no reason not to have airbags in cars. But it would take a big judgment to get them to pay attention. It was unconscionable that for a study that showed that $11 per car is what they were going to save, they added up the deaths and the burns and a tragedy of exploding gas tanks in the Pinot, until a friend of mine, Mark Robinson, brought in $125 million. And suddenly they paid attention. Toyota knew that that was the end of the ball game. Regulations would follow. And they moved theirs ahead of the American market to a safe place. The regulations never followed, and they moved it back. Can you believe? Can you believe? George Bush says tort reform. I'm not sure what that means. I studied the Judicial Council statistics. There are 51% fewer tort cases filed today, despite a 50% increase in the population. What do you want to reform? Do you want to take it all away? Do you understand that when these trucks back up on construction sites and they can't see those workers and they're going to cripple them, there's a thing called a little backup bell? I mean, when my friend Al Levy told me he wanted to do that, I says, Al, you're the guy who would put a roll bar on a horse. I said, we got a bad enough image without going around doing that stuff. Well, they've got them on forklifts today. They got collapsible steering wheels. They've got crush panels. They've got a whole panoply of improvements that have stopped death and destruction, and that's a form of charity too. When I used to have to defend what I did for a living at that time, I always had that in mind, but I never made the connection. Who looks out for the public? The powers that be don't. Never have. Who deals with the residue of the disinterest and the destruction that occurs every day? The poisoning of America, the poisoning of our drugs, the failure to test them. And now they want to eliminate the right to even sue for a bad drug. When we did the Lincoln case, I remember cross-examining the head of the Boston Collaborative Drug Study. I said, boy, you tested 250,000 people in a random sample, and you put up only 7 major injuries, reactions. That sounds like I shouldn't even be here in this courtroom. He said, well, that's the record. I said, yeah. How many of them were Lincoln, by the way? Well, I'm not quite sure. Yes, you are. I'm from Claremont, for God's sakes. I didn't run any studies. I did major in statistics or some respect. I said, how many? He said, well, 126. How many of them were major as you speak? He said, well, 6. And what do you define as major? Well, death. I got to hand him that one. I said, now I don't criticize your study. I said, but I know that you studied the Ward B in New Zealand. You didn't go to Ward A. But you know what happened in Ward A, don't you? Well, you might as well give up. I read your stuff. 43 people took it. How many of them had a major reaction defined as death? 43. What happens in a courtroom is the same thing that happens when these wonderful nurses with concern and compassion in their heart treat the broken bodies that result from our disinterest and our desire to just plain operate on the buck. And then somewhere along the line, I have friends that have done stuff. Bill Chernoff is a young lawyer in my office. He's now a damn old lawyer in his old office. And he's still just as good as he ever was. And at one time we had 5 of the biggest bad faith insurance cases in the United States. And then a younger man in his office who'll be honored tonight got more money in one verdict than we did in all 5 of ours. None of us got to keep any of them, by the way. I always take them away. You never read about that. But they pay attention. They notice. And they change. Why do they change? Money makes them change. That's why they want to make everything arbitration. That's why they want to say you signed an arbitration agreement when you can't even read the damn 25 pages and it's hidden somewhere. That's why they want to take away the tort system, even though in the federal courts, the verdicts have gone down on torts 80%. 80%. And every time I see that guy from Texas say, what we need is tort reform, I'm wondering who in the hell he's got left. Is there an Indian left after Wounded Knee that they didn't get? We do it for free. We lose, we don't get paid. My last trip around the track, I decided, you know something, I can't believe they got $650 toilets. And we're paying for them. So I set my office to researching it. And by God, there's a statute, Abraham Lincoln's Day, called the Whistleblower Act. And how much had we recovered in 160 years? $365,000 in 165 years. Well, those of you with terribly good memories will remember about 5 60-minute cases we put on television about our cases that showed they defrauded you on everything there was to defraud you on. From the B-2 bomber to the MX missile, which is just as able to hit Chicago as it is Leningrad, assuming either one is a good place to land. 17 to $25 billion has been recovered. And what did Ken Starr want to do?